In a comment on my zero bite gravy recipe, someone asked if I had a green bean casserole recipe, and I did not. So I thought maybe I can throw something together, but there was no time. So I came up with this idea of doing a test kitchen where I actually test the recipe right on camera. So I came through with a green bean casserole, or did I? Was this a success or a failure or somewhere in between? You'll just have to find out coming up next. Hello and welcome to my test kitchen. My name is Roy. I am a home cook and amateur baker, and I am here on this channel sharing recipes that have helped me to lose over 125 pounds, whether those recipes are mine or someone else's. Now, you did hear correctly. I welcomed you to my test kitchen. This is going to be a spontaneous video because I was asked by one of my subscribers, Pam, if I had a green bean casserole recipe, and I did not. But I thought, let me see if I can come up with one. But she had asked me when I did the gravy last week, so I'm like, I don't really have a lot of time to test the recipe and make sure it's gonna work and what have you. So I said, let me film myself testing the recipe. If it comes out well, then I share it. If it doesn't, I probably still share it and just say what I would change. So for those of you who are interested in my process of how I come up with these recipes, what I will do is I will go online and scroll through looking for all sorts of recipes that are in that same vein as I was looking for. When I searched for green bean casserole, I got a lot of the Campbell's version where it's just Campbell's soup, green beans, canned green beans usually, a little milk, and some of the fried onions. And that was basically it, which I could have done. I just didn't want it to be the same old boring kind of thing. I wanted to up it a little bit while still bringing down the points, bites, calories, etc. I then started looking at other recipes for green bean casserole that used fresh green beans. I looked for light versions. So I scrolled through the internet looking for things. I'd print them out. I have a printing of some of them over there. And I compile them all together, and then I start going through, and okay, this I like, this I don't, this I'll use, this I won't. And then I kind of like Frankenstein them, take pieces of each that I like and put them together. And this is what I've come up with. If this works out well, which I have a feeling it will, but one never knows when they're testing recipes. If this comes out well, this would be one bite for a serving, and this would serve 8 people. 8 to 10, but I'm going with 8, and that is what I calculated the bites and points and calories and macros for. My water is boiling. Let me turn that down a little bit so that I don't lose the heat, but I don't have it boiling away over there either. So here I came up with my recipe, and you can see I've already made some changes to it. One thing I checked was I'm adding some Parmesan cheese. It called for about 1/4 cup, and I said, well, let me check the weight on that. So that's about 1/2 ounce, so I wanted to make sure I got that in there. Because I try to make sure that if you're weighing your ingredients or you have like a slab of cheese, you're not sure if it'll be enough. If you have 1/2 ounce, that's all you need. I also changed the amount of green beans. I'm going to use the whole 2-pound bag of green beans. This is 2, right? Yeah. I had initially put it at 1.5, and I was like, I saw a lot that were 2 to 2.5 pounds. So I said, well, let me go back up to 2. It only increased the calories a little bit and the macros. Didn't increase the bites at all. Also, another thing I changed, a lot of the recipes use onions, and you definitely can use onion. Partly because my friend Jennifer Lynn does not like onion, and partly because it gives a more unique flavor to the dish. I have opted for shallot. Now, it's going to be 2 small or 1 large, this is relatively large, shallot. And I kept that as it is so that I can show you how to prep it in case none of you have worked with shallot. But if you'd prefer to use onion, you can definitely use like a medium onion. I also decided to add a bit of garlic powder. I did not even take that out. Hold on. See, this is what happens when I'm testing. Well, this is what happens when I film also, but not as much. All right, let me get my garlic powder. I'll be right back. Okay, here's my teaspoon of garlic powder now. We're all set. I even double checked my list, but I wasn't looking at my little notations. And I also have all of the directions here. I keep my pen nearby just in case I decide to change something on the fly or I do something and it doesn't work out well. Anyways, so let me go over the ingredients. I'm going to leave this over here so I have access to it. Because like I said, this is a test, so I haven't really done this before. So what we have is some cooking spray. I have 2 pounds of green beans, and these are the already washed and trimmed in a bag, which was really, for some reason, all I could find at the store. But you should still, even if it says trimmed, double check them because I have found the little woody sprigs off of the end. So just make sure you double check those. I have 8 ounces of mushrooms. I'm using the Baby Bella, the little brown ones, which I think have a little bit more flavor than the white ones, but you can easily use the white ones. You could probably even use canned. I'm gonna say probably 2 cans. I mean, usually the cans are kind of small. If you had a big can, I'd probably go with that, maybe 2 small cans. But again, this is what I'm working with, and I haven't tried it any other way yet. We have salt and pepper for later to taste. I have a can of the Healthy Request. It's sometimes also seen as 98% fat-free cream of mushroom soup. You could get away with using, especially if you're using mushrooms already, you could get away with using the cream of chicken. You could maybe even try the cream of celery. I don't know how that would be, but the chicken would be a little more base than giving you those celery notes, but that might be good, I don't know. But if you are like my friend Bree Coleman, who does not like mushrooms, you can do without the mushrooms. You could also do, as I said, the cream of chicken soup. What you would want to do, maybe, I could see replacing the mushrooms with broccoli florets or cauliflower florets. I think that would make an interesting little mix. And those people who are bothered by mushrooms won't be bothered. I have a 1/2 cup of almond milk. I have a teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce. Still difficult to say, but, or you could use soy sauce. Either one of them gives that little beefy, salty note that you're looking for, so either one. As you saw, I got a teaspoon of garlic powder. I may end up reducing that because it looks like a lot, but we'll see. I think I'll add half of it now and taste it and then see. We have, as I said, a 1/4 cup of Parmesan, which is a 1/2 ounce of, like if you have a block and you're grating it. I think it's best to use to shred fresh. You can also buy fresh shredded, but that usually has like stabilizers to keep them from clumping. But you could use that as well. I'd probably stay away from like the stuff you shake on a pizza in the jar. That's more like fake Parmesan, I think. I don't know. I just prefer to stay away from that. That would have probably even more stabilizers than the pre-grated fresh. I have a 1/3 cup of panko breadcrumbs and 2 tablespoons of fresh parsley. You can, if you have only dried parsley, use 1 tablespoon, and that's how I list it in the recipe as it is now. I think that's everything. Say I have to double check. I have my oven preheating to 350 degrees, and I did put the top rack in the upper 1/3 position of the oven, just so it's close to the broiler, because at the end you're going to want to broil this just to brown the breadcrumbs on top. But I have 2 pans here, because I'm not sure. This is the one I was getting, which is about 2.5 quarts. It seems a little small to me for what I'm doing. So just to be on the safe side, I also have my 9x13 baking dish. So again, first time doing this, so I'm not sure what size pan I'm gonna need. I always underestimate or overestimate, and you know. Anyway, I also, as you saw, I have a pot of water because we are gonna blanch our green beans, but I will show you that in a moment. We have a pan here to cook our mushrooms and shallot. We have a bowl. I don't know if you can see it from there. Actually, let me move this a little bit. We also have a bowl of cold water that I'm going to add ice to once we start blanching the green beans, just so that it stops the cooking. So blanching is just where you cook the vegetables for a brief time, and then you're going to put them in ice water to shock them into stopping their cooking. If you just took them out of the hot water, they'd still be hot, so they would continue to cook. And we're going to be putting these in the oven for a little bit, so you don't want them to get too soft too early. Now you could, 2 pounds of green beans comes to about 6 cups of frozen, or about 3 cans of canned green beans, if you'd prefer to use those options. If you do the frozen, I would take them out and let them thaw, come to room temperature, before going on with any of this, but because otherwise the mixture may get too moist when you're letting everything cook together and the green beans start to thaw out. Okay, so I have my strainer, I have everything. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, did I say? I don't even think I said this. Hello. 1 tablespoon of light butter I'm using. I can't believe it's not butter light, so this is only 1 bite or blue point. With the personal points, I'm not sure. I'm just basing everything from blue, and you guys can figure out from there where you are. I'm going to melt this really quick. It's probably going to be maybe like 30 seconds in the microwave. Okay, so it's mostly melted. It doesn't have to be fully melted because you just stir it around a little bit, and whatever is not melted, the heat of the liquid butter will melt the rest and actually help to cool it slightly. To this, we're going to add in our breadcrumbs, our Parmesan, I'm going with the whole teaspoon. If I adjust it later, you'll know about it. And my parsley. See, I cut up my parsley and then freeze it, so it was still thawing a little bit. But you're just going to mix this together just to kind of make a little crumb mixture. It's not going to get very crumbly like from the butter. They're not going to clump together too much because there was very little butter. But it's just enough to give it a little flavor, give it a little fat. That is it. So this is going to be our topping. So I'm going to set this aside and go on with the next piece. Okay, so the next step, I'm going to take the cream of mushroom soup, and you know I'm greedy, so I'm getting every bit that I can, and just put that into the bowl. Well, you can use a small bowl. I like using a measuring cup, like a larger measuring cup, just because it's easier for me to pour it into the pan later. But you can also use a bowl. You don't have to use the measuring cup. Then we're going to put in our almond milk, but I'm going to put it into the can first. I didn't plan on this. This was just improvised. This is how I roll when I'm in the test kitchen. So, of course, I have to splash it on something. I'm going to add that in. Now that I've gotten more of that out. And the Worcestershire sauce. And then this stuff can go off to the side. This I'm going to actually use a little fork to kind of whisk it together into a more cohesive substance. Just quickly, it doesn't have to be, you know, it's not rocket science. We're just trying to loosen up that mushroom soup and get everything homogeneous. So now this goes aside. Now I already have my mushrooms prepped. If you're not sure how to prepare mushrooms, I have a tutorial that I will card up here and put it in the description box down below. Actually, let me put these into a bowl so that way I can prep the shallot. Okay, so shallot is part of the onion family. It is kind of, in my mind, it's like a mild onion crossed with a mild garlic. Paul loves shallots. So that was another reason I decided to use shallots in this, was just to make sure he got on board. Not that he doesn't like onions, but okay. Now, most of the time when you get a shallot, it'll be in little cloves, kind of, like this. I used to not know for sure, well, does that mean this is one shallot and this is one shallot? But typically one shallot is what I showed you as a whole. And like I said, this is kind of like a medium-sized to a large shallot. If you had a smaller one, you would want to use 2. Now I'm going to cut these into little strips. I'm not going to dice them. In most green bean casseroles, you often have the strings of onions, not little diced pieces. You could dice this up if you'd prefer not to have any of those kind of strings. But because this is almost like a circle, kind of like an onion ring, but much smaller, I'm going to slice this in half down the middle first, and then go across in thin little strips. Now, I use my finger on the back to move aside and show where the knife should go, so that way I'm getting fairly uniform slices. Typically, what you see in a lot of cooking videos, like on Food Network and things, they hold their hands like this, and honestly, I can't cut that way. If you can, fine, do it that way. I am not that skilled. Might be partly because my hands would end up cramping in that position. I don't know. But again, I'm just going to take this, cut it in half down the length, and then just match the width of the little rings here. When you get towards the end, you want to kind of hold it like this so that you're not slipping and cutting yourself. And I'm going to add this in with the mushrooms because these are going to cook together. Okay, so let me clean this up and we will get started on the green beans. Now, as I said, these are already washed and trimmed, but I would not necessarily agree that they're trimmed as well as I would like them to be trimmed. So what I'm going to do is put them in my strainer, which I'm going to be using later anyways, just so I can look them over and make sure that they are, see, aha, not so trimmed, huh? All right. So let's see. These look pretty good. You could, if you wanted to, cut them in half. That's a lot of work I'm not going to do. But you could. Or like I said, you could use frozen. You could use canned. And that will be in the recipe. And the rest look pretty good. Well, there's one. It's not a stem, but it looks kind of odd. So I'm just cutting that little bit off. All right, so let me bring my water back up to a boil. And while I'm waiting for that to come to a boil, let me get some ice for our ice bath. Okay, so I have about 2 cups of ice. I'm just going to throw this into the ice water just to make it even colder. And if it melts too much in there by the time the green beans are done, I'll add a little bit more, so I'll keep that there. Okay, the water is up to a boil. I want to add just a pinch of salt. It's not like pasta where you're going to be cooking it and this is the only flavor it's going to get. You just want a little salt in there just to try to get into the green beans. Going to dump those in. And just going to cook these for about 5 minutes. And while I'm at it, I will look for more strings now that they're floating. It's a little easier to sort. Maybe I should have just gone directly into the pot and looked at them this way rather than going into the strainer. But you want to cook these until they're crisp, tender. And I'm sure you've seen that description before. What does that mean? It means they're not fully raw, but they still have some of that crunch to them. So it's not going to be like soggy, wilty, etc. Now, if you were using the broccoli or cauliflower instead of the mushrooms, I would probably blanch those as well. The broccoli you could put in at the same time as the green beans. For the cauliflower, because it's a little more dense, I would probably put it in 3 minutes before you put in the green beans. And that way you can cook that all together there. And then the only thing you'd be preparing for the sauce-wise, is the onion, shallots, and the soup mixture. All right, so let me give these 5 minutes and I will put them in an ice bath and show you that process. Okay, so if my glasses will stop steaming up on me, I just drained the green beans. I'm gonna throw them immediately into the ice bath and submerge those. Okay, steam is gone. Just to cool down the beans a little bit and to stop their cooking. Now you notice I brought the strainer in over the pot. That's the way I like to bring things back from the sink rather than just bringing the strainer and then dripping a lot of water that I didn't realize was still in there across the floor. So I'm going to strain these in a moment and then I'll be right back. Okay, the beans are strained. Now what I'm going to do is I have a tea towel here. I don't know why they call them tea towels. I don't use them for tea. I don't know how you would use them for tea. But anyway, you want something that's going to be lint-free so that you don't leave lint behind on your green beans, because we're going to lay them out on our towel because we want to dry them off a bit. So spread them out. And just going to pat them dry a little bit. Get in between there. And actually they're a little more cooked than I would have expected. And they don't have to be fully dry. You just want a lot of that extra moisture off of there. Okay, so next step. Let's see, I've got the beans done. Next step, coat a large saucepan. It probably doesn't have to be this large. This is, I think, a 12. You could get away with a 10. You just want to have some room for the vegetables to move around. And when the mushrooms give off their juices, you want them to be able to evaporate, and everything's compact in there together. It's going to kind of steam in there rather than have room for the steam to escape. So set this over medium. That's going to heat up. Then we're going to start with the mushrooms and shallots. So I'll be back once this is warmed up a little bit. Okay, I did have 3 minutes listed here as the time to boil them, and for some reason I went 5. I was wondering why they went over. See, this is why I test things, because I need to get it stuck in my head. All right, so that explains why these got a little too soft, but it's gonna be fine. Not gonna worry about it. I mean, they're not limp and, I mean, they're soft, but they're gonna be fine. So see, I should be reading my own recipe. If I did, I would have said boil for 3 minutes, not 5. Okay, so yep, now we're waiting for our pan to heat up, and we will get the mushrooms and shallots started. Okay, so the pan has gotten hot. Gonna add in our mushrooms and shallots. Now, often I would add at this point some salt to help the moisture come out of the mushrooms. But because there's going to be salt elsewhere in the dish, I don't want to over salt this, so I'm just going to let them go naturally. Now this is going to take about 15 minutes until the shallots or onions, if you're using onions, are nice and soft, and the mushrooms have browned and lost a lot of their moisture. So I will let this cook, and I will show you what it looks like when we get there. I figured I'd stop in here real quick just to show you the moisture that is in the bottom of the pan here, just from what comes from the vegetables naturally. Now that's why you want to have this in a wide pan, so that that will evaporate and not sit in there and steam everything. So, still have about 10 minutes or so, so I'll be back. Okay, it has been about 15 minutes, and you can see all that moisture that was in the bottom that I showed you earlier has evaporated away. The shallots are nicely soft and translucent, and the mushrooms have some brown bits on them. I just stirred them frequently, but I let them sit for a while so that brown would develop. I've mentioned this before, that's called the Maillard reaction, where that browning of food adds flavor. It's like an extra component that you don't even have to use seasoning for. So this is right where I want it. So I'm going to add in the soup mixture, and we're going to cook this, just warm it up a little bit. I have on the recipe 3 minutes, but I really don't think it's going to be that long. We shall see. I'm sure I'm going to cut it down. It'll probably only be a minute, but all of this, if it works out, will be on the blog in the recipe so that you don't have to worry about me putting up the wrong recipe that I have there. This will be the corrected one, whatever I do put in there. Okay, so while that's heating through, just gonna toss my green beans into this bowl, or into that bowl. What do I care? As long as it goes into a bowl. And get rid of this. And I'll wait until this bubbles a little bit, and we'll see how long it takes me. But I'll be back to tell you in 1 second. Okay, it's been about a minute, and when I stir it, it starts to bubble a little bit. When I stir it, the bubbles go away for a moment, and then they start coming back. So that I'm going to use as the indicator. So it's about a minute and a half. Just going to taste for seasoning. Does need a bit of pepper. I'm going to turn this off so it doesn't keep going. Bit of pepper. Paul and I like pepper, so we get a little carried away maybe. And a little bit of salt. And then stir that through. And taste again. Much better. Okay. Now a lot of the recipes that I saw that weren't just using the canned green beans and the 4 ingredients all together, they'd have you layer the green beans in the dish, put some sauce on top, layer the green beans, put some sauce on top, and then stir it later. So I'm just going to stir it all together. And as I said, I cooked my green beans a little longer than I should have. It's one thing in the kitchen, don't let yourself get all freaked out. I mean, I can easily get myself freaked out, but don't let yourself get worried about every little thing. If it's a little overcooked, it's not going to hurt anything. That way you can see what it's looking like. So it's just basically all coated with the soup mixture. I've opted to go with my 9x13 pan. I'd rather err on the side of being a little too big than not being big enough. And this is the tricky part. As long as I don't have a major twitch here, we should be fine. Just gonna put this into our pan. You know me, I'm greedy. So I am getting it all in there, at least as much as I can. I'm not gonna get too crazy. I mean, crazier than normal. Now we're just gonna spread this all out. Now when I told Paul that my partner Paul, if you're new here, that I was doing a green bean casserole because Pam had demanded it. No, I'm kidding. She just suggested it and said if I couldn't get to it till next year, that was fine. But I don't like to disappoint if I can help it. So that's where this test kitchen idea came up. But anyways, Paul, when I said I was going to do a green bean casserole, he said, ugh, He said, do you mean that stuff with the onions on top? And I said, yeah, but I'm not doing it that way. So I will know by the time this video comes out, and I will share it at the end, what his verdict was, if he was swayed or if he was not. Okay, so that's in our pan. And add soup mixture, check, check. And I did have it written up originally to do what they were doing, one layer of the sauce, one layer of the sauce. Let's not get that fussy. We have enough to worry about on our holiday dinners. Now we're going to take our breadcrumb mixture, and because my parsley had been frozen, it's still in a little clumps, so I gotta spread that out a little bit. Usually I use the frozen for cooking in things directly, not toppings. But we're just going to sprinkle this all over the top. Get into the corners, because those are often missed. And this isn't going to be like a heavy, heavy breaded coating. It's not going to be a heavy crunch factor, but it is going to give a little nice textural contrast, so that you have these soft green beans and then a little bit of crunch, not to mention some flavor from the Parmesan and the light butter. All right, that looks good. Now it's going into the oven, covered, for about 20 to 25 minutes. So I have my foil over here, and I'm going to just, I mean, it doesn't have to be crazy. I'm so sorry if I'm crinkling in your ears. It doesn't have to be crazy sealed or anything like that, just covered, because at the end we're going to take that off and put on the broiler so that the breadcrumbs can brown a little bit more if they have not. But I will show you what it looks like before I turn on the broiler. So I'll be back in about 20-25 minutes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here we have the first part, the heated through. Now remember, I'd shown before, when you're taking foil off of something that just came out of the oven, don't open it toward you, because that steam can come up into your face and you could get burned. So always open away from you. Smells really good. I think Paul is going to like this one. All right, so this is what it looks like just out of the oven for the first time. Now we're going to go and broil it 2 to 3 minutes. But you want to make sure that you are watching it, because it's very easy for things to go from browning to burnt. So you just want it broiling until you see some bubbling maybe, and you've seen the breadcrumbs getting a little toasty. So I will come back and show you what that looks like in just a couple minutes. Okay, so I can hear a little bubbling more than I can see it, but you can definitely see the breadcrumbs have browned. Maybe I'll do a side-by-side comparison of what 3 minutes under the broiler can do. But I was watching it. It did take just about 3 minutes for it to get like this. And it smells absolutely delicious. So let me see. I think we have everything on our checklist. Remove the lid, foil, broil, watch it closely. Now you have to let it stand for about 10 or 15 minutes, just so it can cool down slightly and so that the soup mixture is not too soupy. Give it a little time to set up. Then you can serve it. And I will be serving this to Paul. I mean, my criteria is fine to go by. But Paul is fussy. Doesn't like the flavor of diet foods. So he's usually pretty satisfied with the food I make, because it doesn't typically taste like diet food, except for, you know, the sweeteners that aren't cooked. We've talked about that before. He will be the true test of this one. So I will put right here whether he liked it or not. Was this a success? Was it a failure? Or was it, Okay, it is the next morning. I would have stopped in last night to give you this little update, but my body was not cooperating. So I am doing it this morning, and there's really very little to tell. It was a success. Paul enjoyed it. He did say the beans were cooked a little too long, and I told him what I had done, and he said he likes his beans on the softer side, not too crispy. So he'd probably go for 4 minutes rather than the 3 that I'm going to put in the recipe, or did put in the recipe and did not listen to. So if you or your family prefer them a little softer, you can go for 4 to 5 minutes when you blanch them. The only other addition is I am going to add some salt. I definitely needed some salt, but if you are watching your salt intake, you can definitely do it the way I did it and just have people adjust the salt as they want to. I'm going to add about a ½ teaspoon to when you're cooking down the mushrooms and onions or shallots in my case, and that way it'll give it a little saltiness, not too much, but it'll give it a little bit, and then you can still adjust at the table if you need to. And I may even put in a ¼ teaspoon of pepper at the same time, because it did need a little more salt, and we enjoy pepper. So those are the only additions or changes that I'm going to make, is adding a little salt and pepper, more measured than I suggested in the recipe. You can still test the sauce, the mushroom sauce, to make sure that it is to your salt level and adjust it if you'd like to. But it did need a little bit. And so that's it. So I'm going to give you back to yesterday's Roy. Okay, so you just saw whether this was a success or not. And as a success, let me tell you, now that I've stuck the pages together by putting it in the dirty counter earlier, the 8 servings, my jaw is starting to tighten up, 8 servings, 1 better balanced bite. I'm on Healthi. It used to be called iTrackBites. They've changed their name to Healthi. So I'm on the Healthi Better Balance plan, and it would be 1 bite, and this is equivalent to the old WW Blue plan. So you can probably test your personal points based on what the old Blue plan was. If you're interested in calories and macros, because I upped the green beans to 2 pounds from 1.5, the calories only went up by 5 to 91 calories for 1 serving. The fat would be 2 grams. The carbs would be 15.9 grams, and the protein would be 4 grams if you are following macros or calories. So I hope I got this in under the wire. I hope it was a success, so that way you have another option for your holiday table. If not for Thanksgiving, maybe for Christmas, or any family gathering, or even just a weekend dinner. Doesn't have to be fancy. So I hope you found this interesting. If you did, please give me a like. I would appreciate that. And also subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet and you are looking for recipes that can help you on a weight loss journey. And share this recipe, this video. If you know anyone who would be interested, please share this on your social media. Also, comment down below if you found this test kitchen interesting. Like I said, I didn't have a chance to test this recipe before the holiday. So I said, well, let me make this a video in itself. And if you found this interesting, maybe I'll try to do others if you enjoyed seeing the process I go through of how to make it, how to swap out things. 2 other things. I'd already mentioned that you could replace the fresh green beans with 6 cups of frozen, which I would thaw. or 3 cups of canned, which I've 3 cups, or 3 14-ounce cans, which would be drained. But if the mushroom sauce was too thick, you could add a little bit more milk to it. And if you ended up accidentally adding too much milk to it, to thicken it up again, just add like a tablespoon of Greek yogurt. So I hope that you're going to try this on your holiday table if it's a success. If it's not a success, what I'm going to do is insert the changes I would make. And they will also be on the recipe on my blog. And my blog is linked down below in the description box. Just do a little drop down. You can see all the things that I'm sharing down there, ways to contact me, what have you. Also down there is my social media, and you can follow me there. Here's my Instagram handle. And there are 2 Facebook groups that I am part of. One is mine, Recipes with Roy, and the other one is Finding Our Way, WEIGH. And that one I co-admin with the lovely Jennifer Lynn from the Jennifer Lynn channel, and the equally lovely Bree Coleman from Balancing Life with Bree. So join us over in those groups. There's a lot of great tips, tricks, people, support, recipes, what have you. So I guess I'm going to go test this on Paul. Hope my guinea pig is ready. So until next time, bye.